Welcome to Snail Story. How's the weather where you are today? A bit of sunshine? Or maybe a quiet, rainy afternoon? Today, we invite you to listen to a very special story about a man who once denied his role as a father and, 3 years later, upon learning he wouldn't live for long, didn't come back to apologize, but came back to stay. This is a journey of redemption, fatherhood, and a love that doesn't need grand gestures. Just enough grace and forgiveness to stay until the very end. If this story touches something in you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone you care about. Alexa Walsh stood in the elegant office of Bennett Holdings, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might leap from her chest. Her hair was neatly tied up, her navy blue dress hugged her slender figure. But inside, she was a mess. In the pocket of her coat, a small ultrasound photo was clenched so tightly it had crumpled. She had imagined this moment 100 times in her head, how she would say it, how he might react, how she would handle the surprise, maybe even a little joy. She was wrong. Jason Bennett, the young CEO dubbed the cold-blooded dealmaker by Business Magazine, sat behind his expensive walnut desk. Morning light pouring through the glass window behind him, casting a long shadow across the table that separated them. He was reading a report, brows slightly furrowed, as if everything else in the world was just noise. "Jason," she said, her voice trembling, "I need to tell you something." He looked up. Those ice-blue eyes met hers, neither warm nor surprised, just detached attention. Alexa took a breath. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was so long it seemed to freeze the entire room. Jason remained still for a moment, then slowly leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. His expression didn't change. No shock, no questions. He simply said one thing, cold and final: "I will never marry you." No anger, no mockery. Just a sentence delivered with brutal indifference. Alexa froze. For a moment, it felt like the air had been knocked clean out of her lungs, as if that single sentence had emptied her entirely. She didn't know how she was still standing. "You don't want to know if it's yours." Her voice cracked. Jason lifted his eyes from his hands. "I don't need to know." She wanted to scream, to slam the ultrasound photo down on his desk, to shout that this was real. This was a life, not a mistake he could brush off like a failed contract. But instead, she did nothing. Something deeper than pride stopped her. A part of her, old and aching, whispered, "Don't lower yourself again, or you already knew. You've known for a long time." She nodded. Just once. Then, without another word, she turned away. Jason stood and adjusted the cuff of his shirt as if the conversation had never happened. The sound of Disc's heels echoed softly against the polished wooden floor as she walked out of the room, the same room where she once thought love might bloom. The door clicked shut behind her with a soft, icy finality. In the elevator, she placed a hand on her belly and tightened her grip on the now wrinkled ultrasound photo. No tears, no begging, no looking back. That evening, Alexa packed up the luxury apartment Jason had once rented for her in the heart of the city. Every item now felt foreign. The sofa where they used to watch movies, the desk lamp he once said really suits your taste, the painting they bought together at that gallery she took them down, wrapped them up, and sold them. The lease was under his company's name. She wouldn't wait to be kicked out, and she certainly wouldn't take a penny of pity. 3 days later, Alexa left the city. No forwarding number, no goodbye note. She returned to the small town where her mother once lived, a quiet place where no one knew. She had once loved a man cold enough to reject his own child with a single sentence. She rented a tiny apartment above an old grocery store and began freelancing as a graphic designer. Logos, book covers, restaurant menus, anything that paid enough to get by. Morning sickness came in waves, and she worked late into the night. Her belly grew steadily, but there was no one by her side. No message from Jason, no questions, no apology. 3 months later, she sat in a small ultrasound room, blue light glowing on her belly. The doctor smiled and said, "Congratulations. It's twins, a boy and a girl." Alexa laughed through her tears. "Hello, my babies," she whispered. "No one will ever turn you away again. Even if it's just me, I will love you with everything I have left in this life." She clutched the new ultrasound photos tightly. This time, there was no Jasons, just 3 hearts, 1 big, 2 small, beating for each other. Asterisk, the small town where Alexa settled had no skyscrapers or bright streetlights lighting every corner. It was simple, sometimes too quiet, but to her, it was a place to breathe, a place to begin again. Her apartment sat above an old grocery store. Below, a bell chimed every time someone opened the door. Above, a world of 3, a mother and her 2 children, was being stitched together with heartbeats, catnaps, and moments of typing against looming deadlines while a baby cried and couldn't be soothed. At week 32, sudden pain sent her to the hospital. Her baby girl showed signs of fetal distress. After tense hours, the doctors made the decision for an early C-section. Alexa was nearly exhausted to the point of collapse. Everything blurred, surgical lights blinding, voices echoing in her ears. Without clarity, it wasn't until she heard the first cry, then the second, that time seemed to stop. "They're okay," the nurse said, eyes misty behind her glasses. A boy and a girl. Tiny, but strong. Alexa wept soundlessly. Her hands clenched tight, as if trying to hold her heart together before it burst from a mixture of fear and joy. They were moved to the NICU. She named her daughter, Sienna Fatih, the warm sunset color her mother had once loved. The boy she named Caleb, a name that meant faithful, brave, and never giving up. 2 names, 2 lives. And one mother, utterly alone. The first 3 months blurred into endless days and nights. In the hospital, she slept on a stiff folding chair next to their incubators, waking every few hours to pump milk, sitting silently for hours watching tiny fingers twitch in restless sleep. There was no one to take shifts, no visitors. Other mothers rotated in and out. She didn't. There was no one outside to say, "Let me watch them for a bit." Alexa survived on instant coffee, crackers, and the fragile hope that her children would pull through. And they did. Slowly but surely. By the 3rd month, Caleb was the first to be held outside the incubator. Sienna followed 12 days later. Holding them both against her chest for the first time, there are no words for that kind of feeling. She brought them home. The cramped apartment transformed into a universe for 3. 2 cribs filled half the bedroom. She set her desk by the window where sunlight streamed in so she could draw at night when both babies were asleep. Her bank account shrank with each passing week. Medication, diapers, formula, rent, utilities, every line item became a painful monthly calculation. But Alexa never let the children sense it. She smiled. She sang lullabies. She told stories. She even played little games, painting shapes on their bellies with a makeup brush during diaper changes. Like the world was nothing but love. She took every remote design gig she could, cafe logos, country music concert posters, DIY wedding invitations, cheap clients demanding deadlines. Low pet didn't matter. Alexa worked with full professionalism. She had no other option. When Caleb learned to crawl and Sienna said "Ma" for the first time, Alexa cried. Not just out of joy, but because something inside her began to heal. Something Jason had once shattered with a single sentence. She no longer remembered his voice. In truth, she tried not to. Jason Bennett became a fading shadow in her memory. Someone who belonged to a past that felt like someone else's life. She didn't speak of him to Caleb or Sienna. One day, when they were older, If they asked, she'd tell them. But for now, all they needed to know was this: their mother was here, and she loved them unconditionally. 3 years passed. Caleb loved dinosaurs. Sienna loved drawing and old dolls. Every morning, Alexa walked them to the free church-run daycare, then returned home to work. She still lived above the grocery store, still fixed her jammed printer by hand, still used the same dying laptop that wheezed louder each day. But in her children's eyes, she was a superhero. One April afternoon, Caleb was blowing soap bubbles. On the porch, while Sienna spun around in sparkly butterfly wings Alexa had made from cardboard. Watching them, she felt something unexpected. Enough there had never been a dad figure in their drawings at daycare. No one ever asked, "Where's your dad?" And even if they did, Lexa had prepared an answer. Not bitter, not hateful. Just the simple truth. Your father chose not to be part of your journey, but I did. But fatal ways, the master of timing was about to bring that man back. Not through a phone call. Not with an apology letter, but with a chance encounter. A glance. A single moment that would reduce 3 years of silence to ash. It was a crisp May morning, the sky freshly washed after a night of gentle rain. The small park on the outskirts of town slowly filled with families and young children. The scent of damp grass mingled with the sound of birdsong drifting through. The trees. Alexa sat on a bench near the playground, her laptop open on her lap as she quickly revised a menu design for a bakery. From time to time, she glanced up at the 2 children playing nearby, was determinedly climbing the steps to the slide while Sienna stood at the bottom cheering him on, clutching a worn-out stuffed bunny missing one ear. "Careful, sweetheart," Alexa called out. "The 3rd step is a little slippery." "Got this, Mommy," Caleb shouted back, waving. She chuckled, so stubborn, just like her. Or someone else she didn't care to think about. On the other side of the park, Jason Bennett stepped out of a black SUV parked along the curb. He had no scheduled meeting here. In truth, an old friend had invited him to town to scout a location for a new rehabilitation center, one of several charity initiatives Jason had recently started taking an interest in. He wasn't sure why he had agreed. Maybe because he'd been feeling off lately. Maybe because of the lingering headaches that prompted his doctor to order neurological tests. And when the word chronic, slow progressing came out of the doctor's mouth, life suddenly started to feel fragile. He walked slowly along the gravel path, eyes drifting to the children laughing ahead. The quiet atmosphere. The lush greenery was a stark contrast to the concrete and stock markets that filled his days. And then he saw her little girl running toward the slide. Lightly curled hair, chubby cheeks, clutching a Wynyard stuffed bunny, calling out, "Caleb, hurry. It's my turn." Jason froze. That name Caleb pierced him like an invisible arrow. His eyes followed the boy sliding down the slide, grinning. Bright-eyed blue eyes that mirrored his own when he was young. His heart skipped a beat. He stepped closer, unaware of the birdsong or the children's laughter around him. The world, blurred, narrowed down to 2 children, a boy and a girl, who resembled him far too much to be coincidence. Then he saw Alexa. She was rising from the bench, hurrying to her daughter, gently brushing dirt off the hem of the girl's dress. She smiled, tired, soft, radiant, the very woman he had cast aside from his life 3 years ago. Jason stood frozen. She looked up and met his eyes. That moment lasted only seconds. But for Alexa, it felt like a punch to the chest. Her blood turned to ice. Her eyes widened. The wind stirred the design draft in her hands, rustling it like a warning. Jason said nothing. He just stood there stunned. Cutie. Shaken. Alexa tightened her grip on Sienna's hand and turned her face away. No greeting, no tears, not even anger. She simply bent down, lifted Sienna into her arms, and called out in a voice so calm it cut through the air, "Caleb, time to go." The boy ran over. "Why, Mommy? It's getting late. We need to eat dinner." Jason parted his lips as if to say her name, but no sound came. There were no words to begin after 3 years of silence. No sentence could redeem a man who had once turned his back on his own child. He stood there as they disappeared into the distance toward the parking lot. The two children chattered cheerfully, unaware that the man standing behind them was their father. Jason remained rooted in place, hollow. For the first time in years, he was no longer the powerful CEO, no longer the man in control. He was simply a man who had walked away from a family he never even knew he had. 3 days had passed since that morning in the park. Jason hadn't been able to eat or sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the little girl with curly hair clutching a one-eared bunny, and the boy whose eyes looked exactly like his own when he was young. He had never believed in paternal instinct, but for the first time in his life, he felt something too real, too vivid and completely out of his control. His office was piled high with work. His assistant asked if he needed to reschedule meetings. Jason just shook his head. But every report, every spreadsheet, every expansion plan, they all felt meaningless. Instead, he pulled out Alexa's old file. They had been together for a brief period, just long enough for him to believe she was the only person who had ever truly seen him as a man. Not just a cold-hearted CEO, but then he had ruined everything in a single moment of arrogance. With one dismissive sentence, one raised brow. Now, the consequences stood before Bim's flesh and blood, in the bright laughter of two children who didn't know who their father was. That afternoon, he drove to a rundown apartment complex on the north side of town, the address listed on Alexa Walsh's medical insurance records. He didn't know if she still lived there. He didn't know what he would say if she opened the door. All he knew was he had to go. Alexa heard the knock while trying to put Sienna down for her nap. The little girl was cranky after missing a grocery run with her mom. Caleb lay on the floor, building a Lego car, occasionally giggling to himself. The knock came again. Slow, gentle. Alexa walked to the door, a vague sense of foreboding blooming in her chest, and when she opened it, she saw him, Jason Bennett. His suit still immaculate, but his hair was slightly tousled and his eyes sunken. He didn't look like the man who once walked past her without so much as a glance. He looked like someone who had lost something irreplaceably and knew he was the only one to blame. "I'm sorry for coming unannounced," he said, voice rough. Alexa stood still. The tiny apartment, the faded walls, the faint scent of ginger tea drifting from the kitchenette was far too modest a place for a man like him. But his eyes, they held no arrogance, no frost. "Who are you here for?" she asked, keeping her tone neutral. Jason swallowed. "You and the kids." Alexa crossed her arms, leaning lightly against the doorframe. "You don't need confirmation. Yes, they're yours." Jason nodded, his eyes blurring slightly. "You don't need to say anything else," she continued. 3 years ago, I gave you a chance to be a father. You said no. So now what brings you back?" He looked at her without flinching. "I don't know what reason could ever make you forgive me, and I'm not asking for that. But when I saw them, I realized I had done the worst thing a man could do." Alexa said nothing. From inside, Caleb shouted, "Mom." "I finished the dinosaur car." She glanced back, then turned again to Jason. "Come in. But let me be clear, this isn't a welcome back. It's a chance for you to understand the two little people you once refused to know." Jason nodded, as if being pulled from drowning. He stepped inside, not like someone returning home, but like a stranger walking through the ruins of what he once abandoned. The apartment was small, the furniture old, everything simple yet clean and warm. On the table were crayon drawings. A house with 3 people. No father. Caleb ran out and stopped abruptly at the sight of a stranger. He frowned. "Mom, who's that?" Alexa knelt to his eye level. "This is Jason, an old friend of mine." Jason crouched down, emotion flickering behind his eyes. Caleb nodded. "I'm Caleb. I'm 3. My sister's name is Sienna. She's cranky. She yells a lot." Jason let out a soft laugh, but inside, something cracked wide open. Alexa emerged. From the bedroom carrying Sienna, the little girl rubbed her eyes, hair a mess, clinging to her bunny like it was treasure. When she saw Jason, she furrowed her brows, but didn't cry. She simply curled closer to her mother. Jason looked at them, one boy, one girl, and for the first time in his life, he understood. No success, no glory could ever compare to this. They sat in silence for nearly half an hour. Not the awkward kind, but the kind weighted with things too deep to say just yet. Finally, Jason spoke. "I know I missed 3 years. I'm not asking for anything. I'm only hoping for the chance to know them." Alexa nodded slowly. "All right, but if you're here out of guilt, don't bother. I don't need pity, and the kids, they need presence, not regret." Jason lowered his head. "I'm not here because of guilt. I'm here because I've truly changed, and because time might not be as long for me as it once was." Alexa narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" Jason didn't answer. Not yet. It wasn't the right time. He simply looked at Caleb trying to reattach a Lego wheel, and Sienna slowly dozing off in her mother's arms. And he thought to himself, "If life gives me one more chance, I won't waste it again." Jason didn't sleep at all that night. After leaving Alexa's tiny apartment, he drove aimlessly through town, a place once unfamiliar, now tied forever to 2 names that made his chest tighten every time he thought of them: Caleb and Sienna. He had met his children, heard Caleb talk about his green dinosaur, seen Sienna's guarded eyes so much like Alexa's when she was protecting herself from someone who had hurt her, and he knew he didn't have time to hesitate anymore. The next morning, Jason returned to the hospital in the city. The results of his spinal biopsy from the week before were in. He entered the consultation room with a numb sort of calm. The doctor pulled his chair closer. A middle-aged man with a deep voice and kind eyes that didn't shy away from the truth. "We've confirmed it's a hereditary neurodegenerative condition. Any early onset, ELS-like syndrome. Rare, slow progressing. It can stretch from 10 to 15 years, sometimes longer, with proper treatment and lifestyle." Jason nodded. "There's no cure, is there?" "No," the doctor admitted. "We can slow it down. Manage the symptoms. But at some point, you'll begin to experience noticeable decline mobility, speech, memory." Jason exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on the window. "I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid I won't have enough time to make things right." The doctor didn't respond. He simply slid a sheet of guidelines across the table. Dietary suggestions, physical therapy routines, experimental medications. Jason left the hospital with a folder of documents in his hand and a fire in his chest. He might not live to be old, but he could live right and live fully for whatever time he had left. That afternoon, Jason returned to the little apartment where 3 lives quietly thrived. He brought a bag of second-hand toys he had picked up at a nearby thrift store, a toy truck for Caleb, and a box of colored pencils for Sienna. Alexa opened the door. "Not surprised to see him. I figured you'd come back," she said, her voice neither cold nor soft. "I need to talk," Jason said. "It's not easy, but you deserve to know." Alexa glanced inside. Caleb was crawling around the floor, roaring like a dinosaur. Sienna was coloring a giant orange sun on the wall, something Alexa had long since given up trying to stop. "All right," she said, stepping aside. "Come in, but keep it short. I don't have room in my life for vague intentions." In the small kitchen, while Caleb played with his truck and Sienna giggled at the way she colored over a cat's nose, Jason told Alexa everything. No sugarcoating, no pretending to be strong. "I'm not dying tomorrow," he said, his voice steady. "But I won't live a full life like most people." Alexa said nothing. "I left you. I left the kids. And now that I'm back, I realize I don't have 30 years to make it up to them. Maybe 10, maybe less. I don't want your pity," she said instantly. "I know," Jason replied, "and I'm not here to be pitied. I'm asking for a chance not to fix things between us, but to be a real father to them." Alexa leaned back in her chair. Her eyes flickered between anger and something more fragile. "Sienna just started trusting a man in her life," she said slowly. "Caleb knows how to change his own toy batteries. I taught them not to wait for anyone." "If you show up now and disappear again," Jason cut in, voice cracking, "I won't disappear. Even if one day I'm too weak to walk, I still won't leave. Not if you let me stay." Sienna ran over and climbed onto Alexa's lap, holding up a drawing of a bunny. "Mommy, look." Alexa took it, smiling faintly. Then she looked at Jason, saw him watching quietly. Like a man standing outside a celebration he once refused to join, she sighed. "Fine, you can come by. 1 hour each afternoon. No promises. I won't change the kids' routine for you." Jason nodded. "I'll follow their rhythm. And yours." Alexa nodded back, but in her heart, something cracked open just a little. Not forgiveness, but perhaps a sliver of space where hope could enter. That evening, Jason stayed until Caleb grew sleepy and slumped onto his mother's shoulder. Sienna fell asleep on the rug, one hand gripping her bunny, the other clutching a colored pencil. Jason knelt down and gently covered her with a blanket. His eyes blurred. He wouldn't live forever, but he wouldn't walk away again. Asterisk at first. Jason's presence was a small disruption in the otherwise stable, if struggling, rhythm of Alexa's life. He arrived every afternoon at 5 o'clock sharp. Not early, not late, just as he had promised. He brought no gifts, made no noise. Only clean shoes, a humble attitude, and a constant reminder to himself that this was the territory of 2 children who had grown up without him, and a mother who had carried the weight of an entire journey he once ran away from. On the first day, Jason fumbled while trying to fasten a bib on Sienna. The strap caught on her collar and the spoon spilled porridge onto her pants. "Let me do it," Alexa said, slightly annoyed. "Give me one more shot," Jason replied, eyes fixed on night, the child watching him like she was observing a very strange show. Sienna didn't cry. Instead, she giggled. "You made a mess." "It's Daddy," Jason corrected softly. So quiet only he could hear it. On the 3rd day, Caleb shoved an unfinished toy into his hand. "Help me. I can't get the wheels on." Jason sat on the floor, carefully aligning each plastic piece. "Do you know what Daddy does for work?" he asked. "Nope," Caleb said, eyes wide. "Are you a mechanic?" Jason laughed. "No, but maybe I should learn." From the kitchen, Alexa overheard the conversation. She said nothing, just kept washing the vegetables. But her hands trembled slightly under the running water by the 2nd week. Jason began to remember the small things. Sienna didn't like pulpy orange juice. Caleb was afraid of the dark and only slept with his yellow, sun-shaped pillow. He learned how to warm milk to just the right temperature, how to pour water into the kettle without burning the handle, how to tell bedtime stories without skipping a single detail. He didn't ask about the past. He never demanded to be called Dad. He didn't try to replace Alexa. He just did the little things one at a time. Once, when Caleb had a slight fever, Jason stayed up all night to watch over him. He texted Alexa constantly during her late shift, 99.9 degrees Fahrenheit. Don't worry, I'm tracking it every hour. The next morning, Alexa came out of her room to find Jason slumped over the sofa. Caleb fast asleep on his chest, still gripping the collar of his crumpled shirt. For the first time, she didn't wake him. She made coffee for him, let him sleep, and in that quiet moment, she saw the man who once broke her learning how to be. The one who held others up, and so, day by day, Jason became irreplaceable. Sienna no longer clung to her mother when he arrived. She ran to him, arms outstretched. "My bunny ripped again." "Fix it, Daddy." Caleb asked him to read bedtime stories, refusing to sleep unless Jason roared like a dinosaur. Alexa began texting, "Can you pick them up today? I've got a late client." And Jason always replied, "On my way." Never a no, never late one weekend. They went to the park together, the same park where, 3 months ago, fate had reunited them after 3 silent years. Jason carried Sienna on his shoulders. Alexa held Caleb's hand, a family of 3. No one said it out loud, but every stranger passing by seemed to silently agree. A happy family. Alexa stopped at a tree, the tree where Jason had once stood. Frozen, she looked at him. He looked back. "I'm scared," he admitted quietly. "Scared that by the time they get used to me, time will run out." Alexa exhaled slowly. "Then don't count time by years. Live every day, every minute." That night, after the children had drifted into sleep, Alexa sat on the sofa. Jason brought her a cup of hot tea. They didn't speak much, just sat there, in silence, together. And then, like smoke fading into the night, she whispered, "You don't have to be perfect, but if you've chosen to stay, don't ever disappear again." Jason nodded, his eyes stinging. "I'm not going anywhere. Even if I can't stand one day, I'll still be here." Alexa's small apartment, once filled only with the clatter of keyboards and the soft rustle of diapers, now echoed with laughter. Sienna loved sitting in Jason's lap, making him color with her. She no longer called him Mister, but something. Halfway in between half baby talk, half unconscious affection. Bassoon and Jason never corrected her. He just smiled and said, "Yes, Bassoon will color the sun pink if Princess Sienna wants it." Caleb stuck to Jason like a shadow. The moment he saw him, he'd grab a book and demand a story. Hide tiny dinosaurs in Jason's shirt pocket, and giggle uncontrollably when Jason pretended to be startled. Alexa watched quietly from a distance. Every time Jason bent down to pick up a child, every time he growled like a dinosaur or slipped a candy into his sleeve for Sienna to discover, her chest tightened not from pain anymore, but from fear. She had seen him walk away once, and she knew he lived with a disease that no one could predict. Would it take first, his memory or his strength? One early summer evening, while the family shared dinner under warm yellow light, Caleb suddenly asked, "Bassoon, will you be here on my birthday?" Jason looked at Alexa. She lifted her eyes. He nodded. "Of course, I'll be there. What do you want?" Caleb thought hard. "I want a dinosaur cake wearing a party hat. And I want you to blow out the candles with me." Jason nodded again. But this time, something in his eyes made Alexa uneasy. That night, after putting Sienna back to sleep from a nightmare about a dragon eating her stuffed bunny, Alexa returned to the living room. Jason was hunched over on the couch, rubbing his temple. "Headache again?" she asked, handing him a glass of water. He smiled wearily. "Just a little dizzy. It's fine." "Jason." She tilted her head, gaze firm. "You need to be honest with me. What did the doctors say? How long?" He fell silent. Alexa sat beside him, not touching, but close enough to feel the breath of someone holding in too much. Jason swallowed. They don't know for sure. It could be a few years, maybe more. But there will come a time when I won't be myself anymore. I might forget things. My hands might shake. I might not be strong enough to carry them. Alexa's chest tightened. Jason looked at her. If you want to keep your distance, if you're scared, I get it. Truly. She shook her head, eyes glistening but dry. I'm not afraid of caring for someone sick. I'm afraid of having to explain to the kids again that the man they call Dad is no longer here. Jason looked away. I won't disappear, I swear, Alexa. Looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, then starting today, don't just visit in the evenings. Move in. Jason turned to her. Stunned, she continued, voice steady and low. Not to change everything, but because I don't want my kids growing up in something temporary, or waiting for a goodbye that never comes but always hovers. 2 weeks later, Jason moved in. He didn't bring much, just a suitcase of shirts, a few books, and the wristwatch that once belonged to his mother, the only thing he kept close when he was afraid of forgetting time. The apartment didn't grow in size, but strangely, it didn't feel smaller. Alexa cleared out half the closet. Jason chose to sleep on the couch, even though Caleb constantly begged him to sleep nearby and read stories. They shared dish duty, cleaned together, took turns rocking the kids to sleep at night. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real, and more peaceful than any penthouse Jason had ever lived in. One evening, Alexa walked into the kitchen and saw him sitting with Caleb, learning to count using popsicle sticks. Daddy has 2. You have 3. That makes 5. Caleb shouted. Jason ruffled his son's hair. Smart boy. Alexa leaned against the doorframe and said nothing. Jason looked up and met her eyes. No words were needed. They both understood. Family wasn't about bloodlines, or legal titles, or the size of a house. Family was someone who sat down to count popsicle sticks with your child. Someone who stayed, even knowing they couldn't stay forever. Asterisk. Mornings in the little apartment of 4 usually began with Caleb's shout, Mommy, I'm hungry, and the thumping sound of Sienna's feet running across the wooden floor, dragging her one-eared bunny behind her, her constant companion. Jason was always the first to make coffee. He knew Alexa stayed up late finishing design orders, so he tried to let her sleep 10 minutes longer. Breakfast, toast and eggs, sometimes oatmeal with banana slices. Nothing fancy, but always warm. Sienna liked to sit in Jason's lap, demanding to color at the breakfast table. Caleb would describe his dreams like flying dinosaurs wearing tutus, making Alexa shake her head with a laugh. And Jason gasped in mock disbelief. Unbelievable. That tiny kitchen, once a space of survival for a single mom, had quietly transformed into a gentle stage for a full family. No one said it aloud, but everyone felt it. Jason had never lived more truthfully. No longer the CEO with confident strides through glass atriums. He was now a man learning to fold toddler clothes and not complaining when sped up landed on his shirt. He still met with doctors regularly. The disease hadn't progressed quickly, at least not yet, but the long, silent headaches still came. Alexa knew, even when he didn't say a word. One evening, he sat quietly on the tiny balcony, golden light tracing the weariness in his face. Alexa brought him a glass of warm water and sat beside him. The breeze carried the faint scent of milkwood flowers from the shared garden below. I know you're hiding your pain, she said, not accusing, just knowing. Jason smiled faintly. I just don't want the kids to see it. Or you. You don't have to hide it, she whispered. Everyone here has been hurt before. We're not afraid of one more scar. Jason sat in silence for a long time before he said, I used to think love was something you could control, something you gave when you wanted and took back when you didn't. But living with you and the kids, I've learned otherwise. Love is staying. It's making breakfast. It's listening to the same dinosaur story 3 times a night, Tan still laughing. Alexa chuckled softly, but her eyes shimmered. That week, Sienna came down with a high fever and had to be hospitalized. Jason didn't leave the ER. Once he was the one who held her during blood draws, the one who whispered bedtime stories all night, even when his throat was raw, the one who wrapped his arms around Alexa in the hallway when she nearly collapsed, haunted by memories of that premature birth 3 years ago. Sienna was discharged after 2 days. When they came home, Jason said nothing. He simply placed the bunny next to her pillow and quietly went to the couch. That night, Alexa walked out, a light blanket in her arms. "You don't have to sleep on the sofa anymore," she said quietly. Jason looked at her, as if he hadn't heard her right. "Are you sure?" he asked. Alexa nodded. "We're not temporary anymore, Jason." That night, they simply lay beside each other. No confessions, no rushed touch. Just 2 people once broken learning how to exist beside each other again, without fearing what tomorrow might take. By morning, as sunlight spilled into the warm room, Jason took her hand and whispered, "If this is the final stretch of my life, then I can say I've lived fully." Alexa tightened her grip on his hand. "I don't believe this is the end. I believe this is just the middle of a brand new beginning." One August afternoon, Jason received a call from his former office in New York. The familiar voice of his assistant came through, full of excitement. "The board wants to invite you back to lead the company. The Singapore branch is about to launch. They need your vision." Jason was silent for a long time in the living room. Sienna sat on the colorful rug, absorbed in a picture book about dinosaurs. Caleb was carefully coloring in a birthday cake sketch Alexa had given him. In the kitchen corner, Alexa stirred dinner. The aroma of sautéed onions and stewed meat filled the air. Jason looked around. It's a small, cramped space, nothing luxurious, but it was where he belonged. "Thank you," he finally said into the phone, "but I can't accept." There was a pause on the other end. "Are you sure, Jason? This is your chance to rebuild the entire empire." Jason smiled, eyes fixed on Sienna, waving at him. "Bazan, look. I already have an entire universe," he said gently. "I just didn't see it before." Alexa didn't know about the call until the next evening. While folding the kids' pajamas, Jason handed her a small wooden box. She opened it. Inside was the old watch that had belonged to his mother, the one he'd always kept as a memory. "Keep this for me," Jason said softly, her head lifted. "Are you leaving?" Jason shook his head. "The opposite. I turned down the offer to return to the company. You and the kids, this is where I want to stay." Alexa froze. No words came. For months, she'd braced herself, telling herself it was all temporary, just penance. But now, the man standing before her had chosen her. Not out of duty, not out of guilt, but out of love. The next morning, Jason took Caleb to preschool. The little boy squealed with delight, riding behind his dad on their new bicycle. Sienna drew a picture of their family for people. In the drawing, the 3 adults were holding hands, and right in the center was a heart. Jason stared at the picture, speechless. He had once lived in glass towers, led thousands, signed million-dollar contracts. But never, not once, had he been drawn into a picture so simple, so colorful. It's a vital part of someone's heart. That night, as Alexa lay down to sleep, Jason wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not closing the door forever." Alexa didn't turn around. She simply placed her hand over his. "We may not have forever," she said, voice soft as air, "but we have today. And if tomorrow comes, we'll have one more today." Jason smiled. No grand vows, no promises in the sky. just presence and truth. Asterisk. On the morning of Caleb and Sienna's 5th birthday, sunlight poured through the curtains like a gentle touch from the heavens. Alexa woke up to find the small kitchen, already decorated. Jason had stayed up the night before. Blue and pale pink balloons hung from the ceiling. On the table sat a birthday cake shaped like a dinosaur in a party hat and a fairy riding a white bunny. Above it all, a banner Jason had cut and glued himself read. 5 years since you came into the world, 5 of the best years your mom has ever lived. And below, in clumsier handwriting, and 2 years of your dad learning to be a person. Thank you for giving me the chance. Alexa placed a hand on her chest, trying to keep her heart from overflowing into tears. The birthday party was simple but warm. All of Caleb and Sienna's little friends showed up. Laughter filled every corner of the apartment. It was a small space, but love stretched far beyond the walls. Jason wore a white button-down, his hair slightly messy. He carried Sienna on one arm and the camera in the other, snapping photos non-stop. He smiled all day, but only Alexa noticed the fleeting moments when his face grew still, eyes closing briefly like he was memorizing every detail, knowing he wouldn't always be able to recall them on his own. After the guests had left and the twins had passed out from the sugar and excitement, Jason sat at the dining table, now littered with cake, crumbs, and empty cups. In his hands was a thick notebook he had been writing in silently for the past year. "What are you writing?" Alexa asked, standing nearby with a cup of tea. Jason looked up and smiled gently. "Letters for the kids, for when they're older. In case something happens to my memory. Or if I'm not here anymore, so they'll know I stayed." He turned to page lines written in soft, careful script. "Caleb, when you climbed to the top of the slide for the first time, you shouted like you'd touch the sky. I've never seen someone so proud. Sienna, you once shoved your bunny into the microwave and said, to warm it up like my heart. I think you understood love before anyone thought you could." Alexa sat down beside him, eyes brimming. "I might not remember every moment," Jason whispered, "but I'll leave them here and every word." Time passed. As it always does, Jason remained well. The disease hadn't advanced the way the doctors had feared. Maybe it was love. Maybe it was because he had chosen to live right, and time responded with grace. He and Alexa never had a grand wedding, but one quiet afternoon near year's end. The 4 of them painted a wooden sign to hang above their door. The Bennett Walsh family, Jason had joked, "You go first. You earned the headline." Alexa smiled, leaning against his shoulder. One day, Caleb, now 7, looked up from his school essay and asked, "Mom, was Dad an important person?" Alexa paused for a moment, then sat down beside him. "Your dad," she said softly, "wasn't there from the start. But he chose to stay. He learned how to love, how to take care, how to make things right. And I believe the ones who choose to stay are the most important." Caleb nodded thoughtfully. Sienna, coloring nearby, turned her head. "If I mess up one day, will you stay too?" Alexa laughed, pulling them both into her arms. "I'll always stay, and so will Daddy in his own way." Even now, even in every notebook he left behind. That night, Jason sat alone on the little balcony, staring out at the dim lights of the city. The old notebook rested on his lap, pen in hand. At the very bottom of the final page, he wrote, "If one day you ask about your dad, your mom will tell you he wasn't perfect, but he learned how to love you with everything he had left, and he didn't walk away again." And so, the story didn't end with a miracle. It ended with something much quieter. A man who once left stayed. A heart that once shattered dared to open again. A family once incomplete found its way to wholeness. Not forever, but enough. Because in love, what matters most is not how long it lasts, but whether there was enough grace and forgiveness to stay until the very end. Asterisk today's story reminds us, sometimes, love isn't about starting early or lasting forever, about coming back at 5t. At the right time and having enough grace to stay until the end. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the end. Where are you listening from? Leave a comment below. We'd love to know where this story has reached and who it's touched. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to catch more love stories, gentle, slow, but always sincere, here at Snail Story. We'll see you again very soon.